Well, hello, everybody. I hope everyone's doing okay. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Rochelle Fryron, and I am the moderator for today's webinar, New Features for Security Appliances in Nebula. I would like to bring onto the podium Marcus Holmes, Zyxel Sales Engineer. Marcus has been part of the Zyxel team for over 10 years now. But before we continue, I'd like to point out some housekeeping. During the webinar, you'll see three options at the bottom: raising your hand, a chat field, and a Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A chat field. I will be moderating these questions and Marcus will be answering them at the end of the webinar. Also, this webinar will be recorded for your future needs. I will now turn this mic to Marcus. Marcus, take it away.
Thank you, Rochelle. I hope everyone's having a good morning or good afternoon. Today, we're going to be talking about the new cloud features for our security firewalls in Nebula. So for today's agenda, we're going to take a look at the USG Flex support for the new Gold Security Pack license. We're going to take a look at the new 30-day service trial pack within Nebula. We're also going to take a look at some predefined routing options that are new on the security gateways, along with our live tools. That is a new ping connectivity check, domain support for VPNs, and then finally our Geo IP for inbound connections. So first today, we're going to start off our topic with our Flex series support for the Gold Security Pack. Now, if you previously had an ATP or USG Flex, you'll know that specifically with the ATP, there's only one specific license, and that's the Gold Security Pack. The Gold Security Pack included everything from content filtering all the way through Secure Reporter and the Secure Wi-Fi Pack. Now, before we added the Gold Security Pack over to our Flex, we only had two different types of licenses. We had our UTM and we had our content filter as an a la carte standalone option. With the UTM features, you will see that we had everything, most of everything that the ATP had. However, some key features that were missing were sandboxing and the IP reputation and DNS URL threat filtering on the URL threat filter. So on the UTM services on the Flex, we only had URL threat filter. We didn't have the full IP reputation for the DNS added to that. And then of course we didn't have sandboxing. So that's how the that's how the ATP and the Flex differentiated themselves between each other. Whereas the ATP had specifically the sandboxing, and then the Flex series did not have the sandboxing along with the DNS and URL threat filter. Now we've added the Gold Security Pack to the USG Flex series, which now adds both sandboxing and the extra DNS and URL threat filter options for the security features. So this means that now the ATP and the USG Flex are pretty much on par with each other when it comes to the different services that they offer. So looking at Nebula versus on-prem mode, after October 17th of last year, when we added the Gold Security Pack for the USG Flex, we can see that now if you add that, there's two different options. We have our on-prem mode, which is our standalone mode, where you can end up using the IP reputation and the DNS filter, the DNS threat filter added onto it, along with the sandboxing. And then if you move it over to cloud, you get pretty much the same thing, except for you do not get email security with the Gold Security Pack, because the email security was specifically designed for on-prem email servers. But now with Nebula Cloud, that's no longer an option when you move it over to the cloud. Okay, so when we look at the actual Gold Security Pack licenses, it's considered an add-on. So you have your bundled licenses and you have your add-ons. So here we see the ATP only has one specific Gold Security Pack license to enable all of those features. But now here with USG Flex, we now have added that Gold Security Pack in addition to already supporting the UTM Service Pack, Secure Wi-Fi, Nebula Pro Pack, and the Nebula Plus Pack. Now do keep in mind that the Gold Security Pack does not work for the USG 20W VPN or the USG Flex. It is specifically designed for, we have our ATP and then our USG Flex models. Now, let's talk about how we transfer these licenses. So if you currently have a Gold Security Pack license on a USG Flex, it can be transferred to another model a USD of the same model, meaning that if you have a USD Flex 100 and you need to move or transfer the license to another USD Flex, as long as it's the same model, being the USD Flex 100 to another USD Flex 100, you can transfer them over. However, you cannot go from a USD Flex 100 to a Flex 200. Okay, so it has to be of the same model, and you cannot transfer the Flex to an ATP. So, for instance, if you have a USD Flex 100, you cannot transfer the license over to an ATP 100. It has to be of the same model and of the same tier. So, a quick comparison between the ATP and the USD Flex when using the Gold Security Pack. So, the ATP supports the anti-malware hybrid scan mode. And what that means is that on the anti-malware section in the cloud, you'll see that there's stream mode, express mode, and hybrid mode. So on the ATP series, when it's scanning for malware threats, it's going to first, if you do hybrid mode, it'll first scan the local database. And if it can't find a matching signature, it will then move over to the external database. So that's what hybrid mode does, is it uses both. However, on the USD Flex, hybrid mode is non-existent. You can only use either stream mode or express mode. And that's a slight difference between the USD Flex and the ATP. Now, let's talk about how we handle the licenses in the back end. So in the Nebula Control Cloud Center, there is a priority given to overlapping licenses. So for instance, if here at the bottom, we can see our table. If you have a bundled UTM security pack, it's considered a priority 1, along with the Nebula Professional Pack and the secure Wi-Fi. Number 2, priority number 2 is going to be the Gold Security Pack because it's considered an add-on. And then at the bottom of the list, we have our UTM Security Pack, and then our Nebula Professional Pack, and then we have our secure Wi-Fi. So what that means is, let's talk about a couple of different scenarios here. So in this particular scenario, let's just say that the user has a UTM Service Pack, and it has the 30-day trial. So when you activate your UTM Service Pack in the cloud, it's automatically going to activate the trial first. Your 1 year is going to be queued up in the background. So you may have seen this in the past. If you have enabled your security pack for the UTM, you'll end up seeing that the 1 year ends up being queued because it has to consume the trial first. So the trial gets consumed first, and then it will activate the 1 year bundled license. In this instance, we see that the trial has the highest priority, and that gets activated first. And then after this is consumed, it will then consume the queued license of the 1 year license. So in this instance, let's just say that we've added our UTM Service Security Pack, 30 days, the trial has started. But after a week, we decided, okay, well, let's add in a 1 year Gold Security Pack. Well, after doing that, what ends up happening now is we still have our bundled license. The 30-day trial is still active, okay? And then it's going to take over and use the UTM Security Pack because that is priority number 2. Your add-on for your Gold Security is deferred for the next year.
Marcus, we can't hear you. You were cut off. Your voice was cut off.
There we go. All right, so here we're going back to adding that Gold Security Pack. So we see that we still have the demo, or the trial is still active, okay? But now instead of using the bundled 1 year, we're going to defer the add-on, and we're going to activate the add-on first. So now what's going to end up happening is our 1 year add-on for Gold Security Pack will supersede and then take over for the UTM pack itself. Okay, so let's talk about the different hardware variants. So if you're looking at the SKU code of the USD Flex, you'll see that there's 2 different SKUs. The last 5 characters of the SKU with a bundle is going to be 0102F. and then your non-bundled is going to be 0101F. So as you see on the USG Flex series with the 0102F SKU, you'll see that it automatically comes with the trial UTM. It comes with the trial Nebula Professional Pack, 1 year of security pack for the UTM services, and then your 1 year Nebula Professional Pack. On the non-bundled version, you only get a 30-day trial. So we give you a 30-day trial on the non-bundled version for you to test out the services to see if it's something that you would like, but it does not come with a license. What will end up happening is that once you come close to the end date for your Flex trial, you will get a notification in my Zyxel asking you if you would like to renew. And actually, let me see. Oh, I do apologize. It looks like it completely, here we go. Now you can see my screen. Sorry about that. So yes, so we have our 0102F, which is our bundled, and our 0101F is our non-bundled. So again, here we see that 30-day trials come with the 0102F with the 1 year, and then our non-bundled comes with 0101F is just the 30-day trial. Okay, so when it comes to adding the gold security pack to USG Flex with the bundle, right, the administrator can purchase an add-on for the pack. So the NCC in Nebula Control Center, you get the sandboxing, the DNS threat filter, the IP reputation, as long as the security pack is assigned to the Flex unit. So this means that if you were to move or migrate the NCC Gold Security Pack license from your USG Flex and move it to another firewall, you will lose these particular services. You will lose the sandboxing, the DNS threat filter, and IP reputation. So the Cloud Center will revoke Gold Security services if all assigned Gold Security Pack Gold Security Packs are transferred to another Flex. So that basically means that if you previously were using the bundle, the Gold Security Pack bundle, and you move it to another device, it will then gray out these options in the firewall, and you will no longer have access to them. Okay. Now, if you're using the Flex in on-premise management mode, you cannot use the Gold Security tier while bundling with the UTM service while still using the UTM service. So that means that on-prem mode, if you're still using the current UTM services, you will not be able to use the Gold Security tier service. Okay, and here's basically just a layout of how it works. So when you add a Gold Security to your USG Flex with the add-on, right, it starts off with our 1 year add-on, and we can see that it is consuming, right? But if you have the Gold Security Pack, it takes over the consuming period while the UTM Security Pack enters a freezing state. So that basically means that if you are currently using the UTM service and then you add on the Gold Security Pack, it's going to freeze the UTM service and start consuming the Gold Security Pack. And then it's going to defer the old UTM service until the end of the Gold Security Pack. So just remember that your Gold Security add-on is going to supersede or be higher priority than your UTM service pack. Okay, so let's talk about the 30-day trial service, because what we now offer in Nebula is we offer a new free trial for new Nebula organizations. So that means that when you create a new Nebula organization, there is a trial pack that includes the Nebula Professional Pack, the Gold Security Pack, content filtering, secure Wi-Fi, and the Connect and Protect trial. Okay, so this is something that we've added specifically into Nebula so that you actually get to choose and use these services. Okay. So when you go to activate it, there's a section in the Nebula dashboard. And when you go to the Nebula dashboard, there's a section where you can enable your different licenses. So you have the Nebula Pro Pack, the Gold Security Pack, the Content Filter, the Connect and Protect, and then our Secure Wi-Fi. Okay. So when you activate the trial, you would go to Organization-Wide, Configure, License and Inventory, and there is a tab up at the top that says Trial. So there we can go ahead and enable the different packs and activate them. Okay. When you go to the monitoring the trial service status, we can go over to those particular ones, you hit activate, and then when you've done so, it'll show you exactly when the expiration date is, okay? So there is actually a deactivate trial, because if you want to deactivate it early, you can deactivate the trial. However, if you deactivate it, you cannot reactivate the trial. So it is a one-time activation. You can cancel it at any time, but it's basically there so if you want to deactivate it or if you need to move some things around, you can. But it does give you the time when it will completely expire. Okay, so question is, how do you use these organization-wide trial package? Well, the administrator of the organization can choose to activate each trial separately. Okay? The trial can only be activated once, but when you activate the security pack trials, it gives you access to the security service for a specific firewall model. So that means that Gold Security Pack trial applies to the ATP and the USG Flex series, and the Content Filter Pack trial applies to the USG 20W VPN and the Flex 50 and 50W. Okay. So starting in phase 15, which was our previous launch in Nebula, there's a trial versus pro status. So in this situation, organizations that have activated Nebula Pro Pack are, professional Pro Pack trial service are no longer indicated by a trial status. So that was a bit of confusion in the past because there was a trial status. When you activated the professional Pro Pack, it just basically said trial. But now organizations with an active Pro Pack trial service may simply access the Pro Pack content in their base organization. Okay? So administrators may manually upgrade the organization to Pro status anytime when the Pro Pack trial service is still ongoing. And you can manually upgrade the organization to a Pro status, but it will cancel the Nebula Pro Pack trial status when you do that. Now, as far as the limits to claiming trial packs, there is no limit. So each Nebula account may activate 10 trial organizations within 90 days, but there is no limit as to how many organizations you can create with the trial package. So that means that you can activate 10 organizations within 90 days, but you can create as many organizations with it to complete the trial package without any limit. Okay, trial packs for organizations created before this. So really this is something that you don't have to worry too much about because this was about 2 updates ago. But prior to this, if you already had a trial pack, this is for those that were going from phase 14 to phase 15. There was a carryover period, but that's no longer valid anymore because we have gone past that. We are now on phase 16, but there was a prior carryover, so that if you activated it prior to phase 15, they gave you some leeway. Okay, so trial organization packs, again, this is just an example for those that are kind of curious of what the carryover was, but basically in the past, you couldn't claim a Nebula pack if the organization had been used in a trial organization, or if the organization was upgraded to Pro Pack before 15.1, or if the firewall was consuming or expired ETM service package license has happened. So not really much to worry about because, again, this was something that was back in October, but it's just a carryover. So we don't have to worry too much about that. So let's talk about the gateway routing and some features that we've added into Nebula. So we have an option to do more predefined routing criteria. So what we mean by this is when you create a policy route or you do traffic shaping, there's an address field for you entering your IP address and subnet mask. So we can choose now for our routing an IP address of Geo IP or Geo Enforcer in the drop-down list to choose a specific entry for the specific country. So now we also have an option for selecting any and the IP mask. So giving you an example here, if you go to Firewall, Configure, and Routing and click on Add for a policy route and traffic shaping, we see here in our source section, we have new. We have the option to add any. We can choose our local interfaces for the source for the policy route, or we can do it by IP-based countries. So this is for your policy route or your traffic shaping. So we can choose to do a Titan rule for IP based on country, or we can do it based off of local interface for the source of the policy route. So this is something that we just added recently. Previously, it was only by IP address, but now we have more options to choose from. Moving on to the live tool, in the firewall, we have a LAN ping tool. So previously on our gateway, specifically in the cloud, you can do a ping from the WAN side. So this was something that was already offered in standalone, along with doing it from both the LANs and VLANs. However, this is something that we added to the cloud. So now you can choose a specific interface to do a ping test from. So that means that if you go to Firewall, Monitor, and click on the Firewall section, under the ping tools, we can not only ping from the WAN, but now we have all of our interfaces that we can choose to ping from. This is a great tool to diagnose any issue because you may see that, well, your WAN port can ping out to the internet, but your traffic is not passing locally. So what you can do is check your specific interfaces, specifically from the firewall itself, to do a ping to test it out. So that way you don't have to be on premise to see if traffic is traversing the network from the LAN side out to the internet. So again, you could choose any of your local interfaces to do a ping from. So for applications, what we can do here, see, we have our administrator investigating a VPN issue. Okay? So they no longer have to be connected to an end device on the LAN to test this out, because now we can do the ping connectivity check and see exactly if the routing is working properly. So if we're having routing issues, we can sit here and ping from a specific source port or source subnet, and then ping out to a destination. So for a VPN, you can use the LAN side, like we saw previously. We can choose the LAN, and we can ping an IP address through the VPN tunnel to see if there's a routing issue, to see if we get a return from that ping to see if traffic is going through the VPN. So this is a good, helpful tool for having the LAN ping connectivity check, because if you're doing a ping from the WAN side, of course, you can do a WAN ping from the WAN of one site to another WAN site, but that's just doing the gateway-to-gateway communication. For VPNs, we want to be able to see if traffic is passing through the tunnel. So therefore, we can choose our source as that LAN IP address and the destination as the remote LAN IP to see if traffic is traversing the VPN tunnel correctly. Speaking of VPNs, let's talk about our VPN, non-Nebula VPN connectivity. So with our USG Flex and ATP when it's in Nebula, if you're doing a site-to-site to another VPN that's in Nebula, you can use a domain. However, if you're doing a site-to-site VPN with a non-Nebula peer, meaning a third-party device, something that isn't Zyxel or not being managed in the cloud, prior to the last update that we had, you were only allowed to put in the public IP address of the remote gateway. So this could cause some problems, because if your remote gateway has a dynamic IP address that's always changing, one option is to set that side to dial out. However, sometimes that's not often available to do, because it could be possible that you are able to connect up to the remote gateway, but you have zero configuration ability. You have zero ability to go in and change the configuration of that remote gateway because it's being managed by another customer or another company. Therefore, what you can do within Nebula now is we can do a dynamic DNS, or we can do a host name. So prior to this update, you were only allowed to put in the public IP address, okay? But if you have the remote in, like I said, had a dynamic IP address and you wanted to use a host name, we now support the ability to add the host name as the public IP address of the remote site. This means that if you want to connect up to that particular site, you would just put in that particular host name of the public IP address, because we now support the domain name. And this is very, very useful, again, when you have a dynamic peer, because you can implement a dynamic DNS on that remote gateway and then put in their DNS IP address, so that whenever their IP address changes dynamically, your DNS account domain will be picked up for that new IP, and therefore you don't have to worry about having to go in and change the IP address every single time for that particular gateway connection. And then finally, we're going to talk about the Geo IP for inbound connections. So you'll see here that we're utilizing a lot of Geo IP settings. So we saw that with our route, but we can also do this for our virtual server. So virtual server is going to be our port forwarding rule. So we can create a port forwarding rule. So in this example here, we have a port forward going across on our WAN port 1. We're allowing any public IP address to access it on specific port 10,500. So 10,500 is going to be the trigger port because we have different ports between our public and our local. So this means that when anybody from the outside hits the WAN port 1 IP address with this particular port, 10,500, it's going to be translated over to port 443 and forwarded to 192.168.1.100. So prior to our setup here, we only allowed for remote IP addresses, we allowed only to set to any or a specific set of IP addresses that you can choose from the drop-down list. So you could choose and type in a specific IP address via external, and this allow remote IPs is specifically to allow only certain IP addresses in this list here to have access to this port forwarding rule. So it is a way to lock down your port forward. So now instead of only allowing IP addresses, we now allow for the Geo IP. So we can tighten the rule even further and say we only want IP addresses from this specific country. So you can do a specific country, or you can do, say, a good example would be you want to allow everybody in your specific local country, but you want to allow a remote worker that's overseas, you can put in their specific IP address in addition to your local country IP address from the drop-down list. So here we can do the same thing on our one-to-one NAT in addition to the port forwarding. So again, on our one-to-one NAT, in this particular situation, what we have in this example is we have a web server. So the public IP address that we're triggering on is going to be .212. So their public IP address, let's say that they have 61.222.0.210 is their WAN port, but the ISP has given them a block of IPs. Well, we can put one of those IP addresses in the block, and then we combine that to a one-to-one NAT rule to an internal service or internal server at 192.168.1.100. So that means that even though .210 is the WAN port, we're going to use one of the IP addresses from our block, 212, and then we're going to bind that to an internal IP address. And we're only going to allow port 443. But again, similar to what we saw in our port forwarding rule, we can choose specific countries to allow in our whitelist to access this particular rule. So that's basically when it comes to the Geo IP for inbound connections. We're allowing specific countries to be added to a whitelist to allow them to have access to these specific rules. And then that's going to be the end of today's presentation. I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for any questions that you might have.
All right, sorry, I was muted. Okay, we do have some questions here. At one point with NSG, we could do the URL/hostname, but then it stopped working with any USGs rather.
Okay, can you repeat the question one more time?
Of course.
Please.
Yeah. At one point with NSG, we could do the URL/hostname, but then it stopped working with any USGs.
I'm not familiar with that happening with that particular issue. I would actually reach out to tech support with that because I haven't heard of any issues with it stop working. So that would have to be something that would need to be reached out to our tech support department to investigate.
Okay. All right. Yeah, just contact tech support. Next question, are there any plans to add the automatic site to the site VPN for MSPs so we don't have to set up a non-Nebula peer for every, what's this? I can't even read that. 2 second S2 VPN to all our clients?
So they're asking about, looks like they're asking about the auto VPN option. I believe that is going to be added in the future. I don't have a date on when that will be added, but that's something that was requested a lot. And so it's going to be added in the future because there was a feature request that has been requested.
Okay. Another person, is it possible to get a copy of the slides that you used today? Yeah, I can send that to you. But this is recorded, so you can also view it on YouTube. Okay, when will the license activation issue be fixed? Taking 1 to 2 days to activate using my Zyxel portal and cannot activate the licenses through Nebula. I have spoken with support already and they had no update.
Okay, so usually the only delay I know of specifically when it comes to activating licenses is when you order a license, there's sometimes a delay in getting the actual license itself. But as far as putting the license into my Zyxel, there should not be a delay. So again, the only delay I know of is if you order